They laughed.
My own family sat at the dinner table, mocking me like I was some stray dog they had taken in out of pity. I had spent hours cooking, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread, only to watch them scrape my food straight into the trash while grinning at each other. "We don't eat this garbage," my daughter-in-law sneered. I sat there with my hands trembling, the humiliation burning hotter than the oven I had worked over. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just smiled, walked quietly to my bedroom, and pulled out the stack of papers I had been saving. The next morning, instead of breakfast, I handed them the eviction notice. Their laughter died in an instant. "My name is Helen Myers. I'm 79 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been living in the house I built with my husband, Arthur. He passed away a decade ago, and I kept every inch of that house polished with love. The white shutters, the flower beds along the porch, the kitchen where I taught my son to crack eggs and stir pancake batter. That house was our pride, our sweat, and our history. When my son David got married to a woman named Crystal, I wanted nothing more than to welcome her into our family. She was younger than him, maybe 35, with sharp green eyes and dyed blonde hair that she kept perfectly styled. She was beautiful in a way that made people look twice, but her smile never reached her eyes. I saw it the first day we met, though I told myself I was being judgmental. When David lost his job 2 years ago and their family struggled, I opened my door to them. I told them, "This house has enough space for all of us. Come stay here until you get back on your feet." I believed in family. I believed in helping. At first, it wasn't too bad. Their 2 kids, Emily and Jack, filled the house with the kind of laughter I hadn't heard since Arthur passed. I cooked dinners, Crystal helped with dishes, and David mowed the lawn like he used to when he was a teenager. But little by little, things began to change. Crystal stopped helping. She started making snide remarks about the house, how old it was, how outdated my furniture looked. "It's like living in a museum," she joked once, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder while smirking at David. He laughed, and my heart cracked a little. Then it was the kids. Emily, 12 years old, would roll her eyes whenever I spoke. Jack, 14, started locking himself in his room with his video games, muttering that the place smelled like old people. I brushed it off, telling myself teenagers were just cruel sometimes without meaning it. But deep down, the sting was there. The worst part was David. My sweet boy, who once hugged me every morning before school, now sat at the dinner table silent, eyes fixed on his plate, never defending me when his wife or children mocked. That silence hurt more than words ever could. Still, I kept cooking for them. Still, I kept washing their clothes and folding them neatly. Still, I kept tending the flowers out front, keeping the house alive as best I could. Until that night. It was a Tuesday. I had roasted a chicken, stuffed it with herbs from my little garden, mashed the potatoes with butter, and baked cornbread just the way David liked it when he was a boy. The kitchen smelled like comfort, like home. I set the table with my best dishes, smiling as I laid everything out. When they walked in, Crystal wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, is that chicken again?" Emily groaned. "Gross, it smells weird." Jack smirked. "Yeah, can't we just order pizza like normal people?" I stood by the table, my hands folded, waiting for David to say something. But he just shrugged and sat down. Crystal sat across from me, picked up her fork, then dropped it dramatically. "You know what? No. I'm not eating this. It's dry. It's bland. It's disgusting." She grabbed her plate, scraped the chicken and potatoes straight into the trash, and smiled. "See? Problem solved." Emily and Jack laughed and followed her lead, dumping their plates into the trash can with exaggerated gagging noises. Even David, my son, my flesh and blood, pushed his plate away without taking a bite. I felt my throat close up. My eyes burned. I tried to swallow, but the lump in my chest was too big. My food, my hours of work, my love, treated like garbage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I sat very still, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. And then slowly, I smiled. "All right," I said softly. "All right." I excused myself, walked quietly to my bedroom, and closed the door. My hands shook as I reached into the bottom drawer of my dresser, pulling out a large envelope. Inside were documents I had prepared months ago, just in case. Because you see, this house wasn't theirs. It wasn't even partly theirs. It was mine. My name was on the deed, mine alone. And I had already spoken with a lawyer about what could be done if they ever disrespected me too far. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing their laughter echo down the hall. They thought I was weak. They thought I was too old, too dependent, too afraid to act. But they had forgotten something important. I wasn't just a widow. I was Helen Myers, a woman who had built her life from scratch with Arthur by my side, a woman who had weathered storms and survived loss. And I had just decided that their stay in my home was over. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, I put on my best navy dress, brushed my silver hair into a neat bun, and walked into the kitchen where they were sitting. Without a word, I set the envelope down in front of Crystal. She opened it with a smirk, probably expecting some pathetic apology note. But as her eyes scanned the words, the smirk vanished. David leaned over her shoulder, his face paling as he read. Emily and Jack looked confused, still chewing their cereal. "What is this?" Crystal hissed, her voice sharp. "It's an eviction notice," I said, my voice steady. "You have 30 days to leave my house." The room went silent. Their laughter from the night before was gone. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shift. The power was mine again. I turned, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the head of the table. "Eat up," I said calmly. "It might be the last breakfast you have here." And as their stunned silence hung in the air, I felt the first taste of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Victory. The kitchen was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Crystal's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her green eyes flashing with disbelief. David looked like he had been slapped across the face. "You can't be serious," Crystal hissed finally, slamming the papers onto the table. I stirred sugar into my coffee, slow and steady. "I've never been more serious in my life." Emily's spoon clattered into her bowl. "Eviction? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, my voice steady as a stone, "that this house belongs to me. And I'm done being treated like garbage in my own home. You have 30 days to leave." Crystal's face flushed red, her sharp features tightening with rage. "You can't do this. We're family." "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "Family doesn't mock someone who fed them. Family doesn't toss dinner in the trash like it's poison. Family doesn't sit around laughing while an old woman cries in her room. You stopped being family the moment you did all that." David's head dropped, shame flickering across his face. But he said nothing. Nothing. My son, the boy I raised with so much love, sat silent again. That silence was worse than Crystal's insults. Crystal, though, had no problem filling the air. "You think you're clever? You think a piece of paper is going to scare us? David is your son. He has rights. We've been paying bills here. The court will laugh at this." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. "You're wrong. I've spoken with a lawyer. The bills you paid were rent. My lawyer has the receipts. You've been tenants, not owners. And tenants can be evicted. Legally. Properly. This is official." Crystal's jaw dropped. "You conniving old." "Stop." My voice cracked like a whip. "You will not call me names in my house again." For the first time, she froze. Maybe she saw it, the fire in my eyes, the iron in my voice. I wasn't bending anymore. They left me alone that day. David followed Crystal to their room, muttering something under his breath. The kids sulked, glaring at me like I had ruined Christmas. I didn't care. When the door shut, I let out a long breath. My hands trembled as I set my coffee cup down, but inside, I felt stronger than I had in years. That night, I called my lawyer, Mr. Green, a kind man in his 60s with a calm, patient way of speaking. He had helped me draft the eviction paperwork months ago, back when Crystal's disrespect first began showing its teeth. "Mrs. Myers," he said warmly, "I see you've decided to move forward." "Yes," I replied. "It's time." "Good. I'll file the paperwork officially tomorrow. They'll be served within the week. Until then, don't let them intimidate you." I thanked him, then hung up. I sat there in the quiet, staring at the family photos on my mantel. My wedding photo with Arthur. A picture of David as a boy, his arms wrapped around me, both of us laughing. And now, here I was, preparing to throw him and his family out of my house. Grief pressed heavy on my chest, but beneath it was steel. I loved my son. But love without respect? That wasn't love anymore. It was slavery. The next few days were strange. Crystal alternated between icy silence and sharp jabs. She slammed cabinets, left dirty dishes on purpose, and muttered insults under her breath. David stayed quiet, his face pale and distant, as though he wished the ground would swallow him whole. The kids ignored me entirely. But I kept calm. I watered my garden. I folded my laundry. I polished the banister. Every little task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had tried to take. A week later, a knock came at the door. When Crystal opened it, a man in a uniform handed her an envelope. She went pale as she tore it open, the official eviction notice, stamped and signed by the court. Her scream rattled the house. This is insane. She's really doing it. David tried to calm her, but she shoved him away. You spineless fool. You said she wouldn't go through with it. He mumbled something I couldn't hear. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching them, my face calm. Crystal whirled on me. You'll regret this, old woman. Do you hear me? You'll regret this. I met her fury with silence. Then I turned and walked back to my room, my head held high. That night Patricia, my neighbor and oldest friend, came over. She was 78, with curly white hair and a booming laugh that could fill a room. When I told her what I had done, she slapped the table and grinned. About time, Helen. You've been too patient with that viper. I'm proud of you. I smiled faintly, though my heart ached. Do you think I'm cruel? Kicking out my own son? Patricia leaned forward, her eyes fierce. Cruel? No. Cruel is what they did to you. You fed them, sheltered them, gave them everything, and they spat in your face. You're not cruel, Helen. You're just finally standing up. Her words gave me strength. Still, the war had only just begun. Crystal didn't take the notice quietly. She called her family, her friends, spreading lies about me. She told anyone who would listen that I was senile, that I had been manipulated by lawyers, that I was throwing her children out into the street. I knew her game. She wanted sympathy. She wanted allies. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't afraid of whispers. I had my paperwork, my proof, and the truth on my side. And the truth always wins. Over the next week, their behavior grew worse. They stopped paying the small rent they'd been contributing. They left trash uncollected. The kids blasted music at all hours. Crystal strutted around like a queen in exile, her chin high, her eyes spitting venom every time they landed on me. But every time she tried to get a rise out of me, I simply smiled. Because I knew something she didn't. The court date was set. And when that day came, she wouldn't just lose her place in this house. She would lose her power. Her control. Her smug laughter. She thought she was playing a game with me. But she was playing against a woman who had weathered storms she couldn't imagine. A woman who had buried her husband and still stood strong. A woman who had nothing left to lose, and therefore, nothing left to fear. And that made me dangerous. One night, as I sat in my room folding clothes, I heard Crystal laughing downstairs. I paused, listening. She's bluffing, she told David. She's old and bitter. The judge won't side with her. We'll still be here at Christmas, you'll see. David murmured something weak. Crystal laughed again, cruel and sharp. And when she finally croaks, this place will be ours anyway. So let her play her little games. It doesn't matter. My hands froze on the fabric. Her words cut like knives. But instead of tears, a smile spread across my face. Because what Crystal didn't know was that I had already made arrangements. If anything ever happened to me, this house, my beloved house, wouldn't go to them. It would go to the local veterans' shelter. And Crystal? She would be left with nothing but her bitterness. I folded the shirt carefully, set it aside, and whispered into the quiet room, "You're in for a surprise, Crystal. A very big surprise." The day of the hearing dawned gray and heavy, clouds pressing low as if the sky itself wanted to witness what was about to unfold. I dressed carefully that morning, a neat navy dress, my silver hair tied back into a smooth bun, and my late husband's gold brooch pinned on my cardigan. Arthur had always said, "Dress with dignity, even when walking into a storm." When I walked into the courthouse, my cane clicking against the marble floor, I saw them waiting across the lobby. Crystal was in a tight black dress, her blonde hair curled to perfection, makeup layered thick enough to hide her rage. She clung to David's arm as if she were the grieving victim in all this. David looked pale, his suit wrinkled, his eyes tired. The children weren't there, thank heaven for that. Crystal spotted me and sneered. "Ready to embarrass yourself, Helen?" I gave her a small, cool smile. "Always." Inside the courtroom, the air was sharp with tension. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, sat at the bench. My lawyer, Mr. Green, shuffled papers beside me, calm as ever. Across from us, Crystal had hired her own lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit who smirked as though this was already won. The hearing began. Crystal's lawyer jumped up, painting me as a bitter old woman, unfit to manage her own home. He called me fragile and confused, even hinted at senility. Crystal dabbed fake tears with a tissue, her voice trembling as she told the court how heartless I was, how I was throwing her poor children into the streets. She played the role well, the abandoned, mistreated daughter-in-law trying to protect her family. I let her spin her web. I didn't flinch. I sat straight-backed, my hands folded in my lap, every wrinkle on my face carved with patience. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green rose, his voice calm but steady. "Your Honor, here are the property records. This home belongs solely to Mrs. Myers. Here are receipts proving that all utilities and taxes have been paid exclusively by her. And here," he laid down another folder, "is proof that the contributions made by Mr. and Mrs. Myers' tenants were labeled as rent. Legally documented. These were not co-owners, but renters. Renters who now refuse to vacate." The judge's eyes scanned the documents, her brows lifting. But Mr. Green wasn't finished. He pulled out another set of papers. "And here, Your Honor, is a notarized amendment to Mrs. Myers' will. Should anything happen to her, the property in question is not to pass to her son or his family. Instead, it has been bequeathed in full to the Fayetteville Veterans Shelter." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Crystal's face drained of color. The judge looked at her sharply. "Is this true?" Crystal stammered, her voice rising. She's manipulating this. She's old, she doesn't know what she's doing. This is all a trick." The judge's gavel struck once, silencing her. "Enough. The paperwork is clear. This house belongs to Mrs. Myers, and she has every legal right to remove you from it. You have 30 days to vacate. Do not test the court's patience further." Crystal's scream tore through the room. "This isn't fair. We're his family. We deserve it." The judge's gaze hardened. "What you deserve has nothing to do with the law. Case closed." The gavel came down again, and it was done. As we left, Crystal stormed past me, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. David followed, his shoulders hunched. Neither looked at me. I walked slower, steadier, each step heavier with relief. Outside, Patricia was waiting. She had insisted on coming with me, her curly white hair pinned back, her laughter already bubbling in anticipation. When she saw my face, she grinned. "You won, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. "I did more than win, Patricia. I closed the book." But Crystal wasn't finished. Oh no. She launched into a campaign of gossip and venom the very next day. She cornered neighbors at the grocery store, telling them I was cruel, unstable, that I had betrayed my own son. She called my church, demanding the pastor intervene. She even tried posting online, painting herself as the victim of a greedy, bitter old woman. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead. You see, I had saved everything. Every snide remark she made to me, I had written down. Every time she mocked me or tossed food in the trash, I had dated and recorded. I had even kept the threatening notes she left by the sink, telling me I was lucky she tolerated me in my own home. And then there were the witnesses. Patricia, of course. The mailman who once overheard Crystal shouting at me in the driveway. Even Mrs. Delgado from across the street, who had seen Crystal order her children to dump my garden tools in the trash. When Crystal tried to smear me, I quietly shared my folder with the right people. The pastor. The neighbors. A few members of the town council. The truth spread like wildfire, burning down every lie she told. By the end of the week, she wasn't the victim anymore. She was the bully. And people don't like bullies. I watched from my porch one evening as two of her so-called friends walked right past her at the market, not even stopping to say hello. I saw her standing in the parking lot, her face red with humiliation as whispers circled around her. Patricia sat beside me, sipping sweet tea. "Karma's fast when you help it along," she said with a grin. I chuckled softly. She hasn't even seen the half of it. Because my revenge wasn't just eviction. It wasn't just humiliation. It was ensuring that she learned, for once in her selfish life, that cruelty has consequences. So while she fumed and sulked, I prepared the final twist. I called Mr. Green again. "I want to move forward with the donation paperwork," I told him. "Make it public. Let everyone know this house is going to the veterans shelter when I'm gone." He chuckled. "That'll sting her worse than any eviction." "Yes," I said quietly, my eyes on the sunset. "Because for all her scheming, she'll end up with nothing. Not a dime. Not a brick." And I knew, when the day came for her to pack her things and leave, she would finally understand what it felt like to be powerless. To stand in someone else's house, someone else's life, and realize she had no claim, no right, no control. That was the kind of lesson you don't forget. And I was going to make sure she learned it well. The countdown began. 30 days. That's what the judge had given them, and I marked each one on my kitchen calendar with a red pen. Every X was a step closer to freedom, every X a reminder that I wasn't powerless anymore. But inside my house, the atmosphere grew colder by the day. Crystal sulked like a queen stripped of her crown, storming around the kitchen, slamming cabinet doors, muttering curses under her breath. David hardly looked at me at all, skulking about with his shoulders hunched, his shame swallowing him whole. Emily and Jack no longer laughed in the living room, instead they glared at me, their headphones permanently glued to their ears. It didn't matter. I had endured worse storms. On the 10th day, Crystal tried her first trick. She called me into the living room, her face painted with false sweetness. "Helen," she began, patting the sofa cushion beside her. "We've been thinking. Maybe we could compromise." I stayed standing, my cane steady against the hardwood floor. "Compromise?" She nodded, her green eyes flashing with calculation. "You let us stay, maybe not for free, but we'll call it partnership. We'll pay some bills, help with the house. And in return, you get to keep your family close." I studied her, the way she tilted her head, the way her smile looked more like a snarl waiting to pounce. "Partnership," I repeated slowly. "Yes," she said, too quickly. "Because deep down, you don't want to be alone, do you? You need us. And we need this house. It's a win-win." I leaned forward slightly, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "No, Crystal. I don't need people who throw my food in the trash and laugh while doing it. I don't need cruelty under my roof. What I need is peace. And I'll have it again, the day you walk out that door." Her smile broke, her lips curling into a snarl. "You old witch. You'll regret this." As for David, I heard he'd picked up part-time work at a hardware store. No more cushy lifestyle, no more free meals, no more roof handed to him on a silver platter. For once in his life, he had to stand on his own 2 feet. It hurt to think of him that way, my boy, reduced to that, but deep down I knew it was what he needed. Maybe losing everything would finally teach him the value of respect. Weeks passed. The house grew quiet again, filled with the simple rhythms of my life. I planted new flowers in the garden, cleaned every corner they dirted, polished the floors until they shone. With every sweep of the broom, I felt like I was sweeping away the bitterness they had left behind. But then one evening, just as the sun was setting, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, David stood there. His face was thinner, his hair unkempt, his eyes tired. He looked nothing like the proud man who had once walked through my door with his new bride. He looked like a boy again, lost, ashamed. "Mom," he said softly. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting him in. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, his voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. "Sorry for what, David?" "For letting her treat you that way," he whispered. "For not standing up for you. For forgetting who you are." He looked up at me then, his eyes red. You gave me everything, Mom. And I repaid you with silence. I don't deserve this house. I don't deserve anything from you. I reached across the table, placing my wrinkled hand over his. No, you don't, I said gently. But you do deserve a chance to start over. Without her. Without her poison. He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. For the first time in years, I saw my son again, not the broken man Crystal had twisted, but the boy I raised, the boy who once hugged me so tightly I thought my heart would burst. We sat there in silence for a while, the air heavy but healing. Later that night, after he left, I stood by the window, watching the stars flicker above the garden. For the first time since Arthur passed, I felt peace settle over me. I had lost much, but I had gained more. Respect, dignity, justice, and revenge, sweet, undeniable revenge. Because Crystal thought she had won when she mocked me, when she tossed my food away. She thought she had broken me. But she was wrong. In the end, I had taken back everything she thought she owned, the house, the future, the respect of the community, and left her with nothing but her bitterness. And that, I realized, was the sweetest justice of all. As the night air drifted through the open window, I whispered to the stars, to Arthur, to myself. They laughed when they tossed my dinner in the trash. But I had the last laugh. And I did.